There's something distinct about being the first child. The first child who arrived while the family was still searching for its full identity. The newest member of the family, Chabeli Iglesias, born in 1971, before her father's divorce. Right before he became a global star, Chabeli was there for all of it, before and after. That meant she carried something her younger brothers never would, the memory and history of her family before fame, a weight that carried meaning specifically for Chabeli. Chabeli Iglesias. Maria Isabel, named after her mother. Born in Madrid in September 1971. At that time, her father was a rising star in Spain, but not yet a global phenomenon. Her parents' marriage coincided with their years of maturing as a couple. Chabeli experienced something her siblings never did, the years before fame arrived for the Iglesias family. By the time she was old enough to form lasting memories, her father Julio Iglesias was becoming a name spoken often across Spain and the world, and the family was shaping itself around that reality. Concerts, tours, countries Chabeli had never seen became the backdrops for her father's magazine photo shoots. She was 8 when her parents divorced in 1979, the same age at which Enrique would later describe fully understanding his father's absence. What Chabeli learned at that age was different. She was the eldest of the siblings, older sister to Julio Jr. and Enrique, an older sister who had already come to understand what it meant to be a child of the Iglesias family, a family unlike any other. There was something that set Chabeli's story apart from her siblings. Julio Jr. tried to follow in his father's footsteps in music and carried the weight of being constantly compared to him. Enrique, on the other hand, rejected the family's fame to prove himself on his own terms, and succeeded, becoming one of the biggest stars of his era, beloved by millions. Chabeli took a completely different path from both of them. Not music. First in Spain, then in the United States, she became a journalist and television host. The media industry was the career path Chabeli was looking for. She knew her family was associated with music, but she positioned herself on the opposite side of that world entirely. She became a professional who interviewed people and hosted programs about entertainment culture. This choice would, without question, draw far less attention than the more glamorous paths her brothers took. Without cutting ties to the entertainment and media world that shaped her childhood, she had a career she could sustain without ever stepping onto a stage and being compared to the man whose name she carried. This was a choice she made of her own free will. She wasn't rejecting her father's world, nor did she want to shape it. She was simply showing the world that the same house could have a different room. Her mother also played a role in Chabeli's childhood. Isabel Preisler. After the divorce, she didn't fade into the background. Quite the opposite. She became one of Spain's most recognizable celebrities. Her later marriages and the constant tabloid coverage of her life kept her, and by extension her children, perpetually visible in the Spanish media. For Chabeli, this meant growing up not only as Julio Iglesias' daughter, but also as Isabel Preisler's daughter. Another dimension of a life that, like her siblings, resembled a second, parallel universe. Spanish tabloid culture has always had a particular fascination with celebrities' children, especially their daughters. There's a quiet, ever-present, unspoken expectation that sooner or later, the daughter will become part of the story herself, her life, her choices. Chabeli, even if she never openly acknowledged it, grew up inside that expectation. What stands out is how she handled it. She didn't hide from public life, nor did she put her life on display for the public. Without using her mother's fame as a shield, she built her own life on her own terms. She chose to lay the foundations of her life in the United States. For Chabeli, life wasn't defined as the fame-filled existence of Julio and Isabel, but as her own battle to become herself, through her own efforts. She did everything she could to exist on her own terms, and she succeeded. What happened between Julio and Chabeli received far less public attention than what happened between him and Enrique. This may be because father-son dynamics tend to draw more interest than father-daughter ones. What emerges from occasional interviews and public appearances points to something quite different from the public drama that characterized Julio's relationship with his sons. There was no equivalent of the father versus son narrative the press built around Enrique. There was no public withdrawal, no Julio Jr.-style retreat from a name that felt too heavy to carry. Instead, there was something more ordinary, and in some ways more universal. A relationship between a famous, often absent father and his eldest daughter, played out largely in private, with no dramatic arc shaping it into a clean story. Chabeli appeared at family events, was present for important moments, and eventually took on the role of older sister within a large and complicated family that included her 2 brothers as well as Julio's 5 children with Miranda Reinsberger. As those younger half-siblings were growing up, Chabeli was already an adult, someone who had processed her own childhood experience. However, she had processed it, and who was now positioned as someone who had already done the work her younger siblings were just beginning. There's something quietly significant in that position. In a family like this, the eldest child becomes, without choosing to, a kind of bridge. Someone who remembers the family's earlier years, who had a relationship with their father before the full scale of his fame, and who can offer younger siblings something their father sometimes couldn't, the perspective of someone who lived through it first and came out functional, settled, and at peace enough to be present for them. She married Ansel Corey, an American businessman, and the couple settled in Miami. They had 2 children, a son and a daughter, before later divorcing. What stands out about this part of Chabeli's life isn't the marriage or its end. That part is as ordinary as most marriages and their endings. What stands out is what she chose to build for her own children. Chabeli has always chosen to keep her children away from public attention. She chose to live without the fame she inherited from her family. Having grown up in an environment where her father's celebrity touched every member of the family, Chabeli made a different choice for her own children. Privacy and ordinariness became her guiding principles. Unlike her father, who was often far away or on tour during the times his children needed him most, she became a mother who chose to be present. Her goal was simply to be an ordinary, non-famous mother. Her only wish was to witness her children growing up, share in their emotions, and grow alongside them. Chabeli never became a singer competing with her father's legacy, nor did she adopt her mother's tabloid persona. She chose to be an ordinary mother to her own children, because she knew that family should be at the center of life. She wouldn't repeat her parents' mistakes. If there's one common thread in Chabeli's choices, it's that she never played the role written for her. She wrote her own. The real work wasn't to be seen, noticed, or applauded, but to quietly be herself. What makes Chabeli Iglesias' story worth telling is precisely this. Despite, or perhaps because of, the fact that it doesn't fit a dramatic, easily told narrative shape. No rivalry, no public rejection, no triumphant return, no headline-worthy reconciliation. Instead, there's something quieter, and in its own way more instructive. Simply the story of a family member who built a life. Julio Jr. had to come to terms with stepping back from a name too heavy to carry. Enrique had to build an entirely new identity, in opposition to one already constructed for him. Both stories involve struggle, rejection, eventual resolution, a story shape audiences recognize. Chabeli's story doesn't have that shape, and that absence is exactly the point. Being the eldest child of someone extremely famous doesn't have to be a wound requiring public healing. It can simply be a fact of your life, one piece among many, something you carry into a career, a marriage, your own family, without it needing to define you or require resolution. Chabeli didn't need to overcome her father's legacy, escape it, or dramatically reconcile with it. She built something alongside it, adjacent, connected, but not consumed. There's a quiet wisdom in that, one that rarely gets a documentary made about it, precisely because it doesn't put its own importance on display. What Chabeli seems to have understood, through choices made gradually and largely out of public view, is something her father learned the hard way over decades, and each of her siblings had to discover through very different struggles. A family name isn't exactly a trap or a gift, it's simply where you start. What you do with the rest, the career you choose, the privacy you protect, the children you raise, the way you choose to show up for the people who depend on you. That's the part that's truly yours.